Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we are changing the mental health narrative, bringing hope and solutions. Here's your host, Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist.
Aaron Johnson is a public speaker, facilitator, filmmaker, and touch activist whose work centers on one of the most underinvested topics in America, the emotional and relational lives of Black men. As the founder of the Chronically UnderTouched Project and a founder of Holistic Resistance and Grief to Action, Aaron creates environments where Black-bodied individuals can express their full selves and be held with tenderness, care, and truth. Well, Aaron, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
So good to be here with you.
I'm hoping you can get us started by telling us a little bit about how you got into the work you're doing and what drives your passion for it.
Yeah, I think it goes back to a tragedy. The passing of my father, 2010. I remember his passing was shocking to me. That was loving my father very close to him. And as the tragedy unfolded, I was one of the last ones to see him right after he passed. And what was significant about the tragedy was I was unable to cry or feel or even express any tender emotions. And it was going to be almost 2.5 years past his death when I even began to start working on it. Eventually had my first cry in my adult life, mostly. I mean, it was huge. And so in that breaking open and working on my emotional piece, I discovered that I was not only missing the casual safety and skill set to feel my emotions and express them skillfully or just thoughtfully, I also had a deep desire for platonic touch. And I realized how difficult it was once I realized that was a need, how difficult it was when you actually find it. And I spent the next maybe year working on developing just a platonic touch practice, those I trusted, and did a little bit of research. And then eventually I ran into a hard spot in my mentorship program I was running at the time with a young Black man I was working with. And I asked him the question, when was the last time he had thoughtful platonic touch? And he said, man, I can't think of it. Yeah, I think the formal question I asked him was, when was the last time he had 3 minutes of thoughtful touch in the last 12 months? And he couldn't think of 3 minutes in the last 12 months. And we did a little thought practice and just kept going back and back and back until he came to his childhood experience with his grandfather. He was maybe 5 years old and he was playing horsey on his grandpa's knee. And that was the only time he could think of thoughtful platonic touch with anyone. And that moment right there, when I left that conversation with talking to him, I realized that I needed to make this not so cryptic, not so difficult, not so unavailable specifically for African heritage men and ultimately for all men. But I just found that Black men had extra barriers that is not surprising, but also felt very sad and tender that there was extra barriers for us to go through, particularly here in the United States, to access our tender touch. So that was how I got into the work by way of my father's tragedy. And the passion was talking to these young men about it and hearing their stories, really realized that we need to make a space, a path, a way in.
And so what are the questions that come to me are these two. What do you think is, the primary factors responsible for maintaining this? And what do you do to help people overcome this problem?
Yeah, I think the overcoming is nuanced. We all have different levels of trauma here and hurt or geographical location or community around us. But I think the thing I've noticed often with the men I've worked with is fear of their peers. I think men have been taught to be really eerie of each other. And it's a big deal to really show your tender underbelly to a fellow man and know when it's appropriate to do so or when it's safe to do so, and what kind of conversation one needs to have beforehand to really say, I want to show up and be in a safe peer-to-peer, vulnerable contact, open space with you that's not violent, that's not a sport. So that to me feels like a big piece that every brother I work with has some level of fear of their fellow man. Even if they've had good male relationships at times, they still have this, it varies, but a common fear. There's a way that even when a man doesn't have violent tendencies per se or have a violent environment, there's a verbal teasing, there's a emotional soft attack, sometimes joking that shuts down tender, vulnerable communication, tender, vulnerable asks. To let that sit in the air is something that I find to be a major barrier. Yeah, a major barrier for.
So how do you help them overcome that?
I think the first thing I learned was to slow myself down, because when I first got a hang of this, I was like, we got to fix this fast and big and wide. And I realized very quickly that speed is a problem, that being slow with inquiry, not rushing the healing practice. So what I typically do is I invite folks to really slow down the energy around this idea of wanting to have a safe space to reveal yourself and ask questions. Like get yourself. I always invite folks to investigate themselves, get to know their journey thus far in their life. So if I use myself as an example, the kinds of questions I would like to know is who modeled safe, non-yelling, non-aggressive communication, non-violent communication around me? What influences the way I connect? As an adult, how do I create friendship and closeness and intimacy with other men? These are questions that start to inform either the lack of exposure I've had to these things, or it might inform where I have that space. So I find questions being a portion of it. Another practice of it is really having and this varies from person to person, but some type of natural, casual, uncurated, but yet just intentional relationship with nature, getting your feet on earth, getting your body out into nature. It might seem obvious or small, but it's like one of the safest places. I mean, nature can be dangerous. I get that. But just the simple parts of touching nature is a way that I have found men to really regulate themselves, get themselves kind of out of their head and a little more into I'm in this nature space, if that's something they're able to get access to. Another one is, I think, really assessing, kind of maybe deciding what your touch needs might be, a little bit of imagination, and then kind of walk yourself backwards from that need to how you might have to arrive there. And then this is where I think my work comes in, is that finding a film, a program, a place where someone can remind you you're not alone and be a peer with you, not necessarily a guru to like stand over and say, I'm going to fix everything about you. No, someone can sit with you and just help you think, help you step forward with support, building that modern day village of folks around you. And I think that's why we try and build more of a village container in our work. We try and do it together. We try and learn together, meaning that we have thinking I have worked on for years. I have experience and all these things, and even a method, but I really try and offer it up as a part of the village thinking and keep the room open to allowing participants to say, hey, I want to try lifting some weights and then going for a walk and then listening practice. I'm like, great, let's go lift some weights. Let's go for a walk and let's do a listening practice after that. It sounds like a great strategy. Let's try it out. Maybe they're really good at something. Maybe they're really good at a particular skill set. And they want to try that skill set and weave it into their healing practice so they feel comfortable, they feel confident, they can go into something more vulnerable. So I always try and stay attuned to the room, to the brothers that are in the room, to the gifts that are in the room, and let us be creative and not ever too rigid on this is how we do it. But the this is how we do it method is that we stay open, we stay communicative, we track our capacity, we stay at a peer level. We try and watch where power and hierarchy can come in. And it slips in there here and there, but just making sure it doesn't like take over the room. That when it's there, we can kind of, hey, wait, I think a little bit of, power over is coming up here. Can we practice, communicate in a way that even if I have more knowledge, I have more years, I have more money, whatever the hierarchy power thing is, that we can notice that power dynamic and really track what it means to communicate from a much more in your eye, in your heart place. And like from that, call it a nest. From that nest, I think we have been able to make some extraordinary progress with brothers' trauma stories around touch, around vulnerability, about showing up for each other.
And you're talking about this, and I'm getting a picture in my head of you meeting person to person with people in a room. Is that
Yeah, we
correct?
kind of typically, yeah, we could do one-on-one and we also work in small groups. I think personally, I think we've seen the most progress in small groups. There's something beautiful about 4 or 5 brothers working together from different angles of their own hurt. But one-on-one works too. I mean, that feels safer for some people. But if I had to pick a favorite, I would say small groups are, yeah, 10 or less. Ooh, sweet spot.
And so, do you have programs running where people are getting together like that in small groups and doing this kind of work?
Yeah. So right now we're actually focusing on our facilitator training program, which we're focused on training leaders to lead these groups. I have had several groups. I have a current men's group right now that I'm working with Black men that are really working on this material directly. But right now we're realizing what we're lacking is skillful leadership. Folks can skillful hold this space because it's such a unique space. We realize we're under resourced in facilitators. So right now our big focus is our facilitator training program, and shortly after we'll need all those facilitators that graduate or complete the program. We'll be needing groups to support or be creating their own groups, and so we'll be kind of in a rollout of building out support groups throughout the country and starting on the west coast of California.
So, are you currently doing training for people to be facilitators?
The program, I think, rolls out in a couple of months. So we'll start, I think, taking applications in like early August. I think actually this month, the program opens, but we still won't start training. Won't start until August.
So, where do you direct people to find out about this?
A good place to start is cutproject.org. Just click on there and there'll be a prompt to apply or read more information or get a calendar of what's happening. So I would say start with the website, cutproject.org.
And the CUT project is the Chronically UnderTouched.
Correct. That's the acronym for Chronically UnderTouched.
So is it's such a weird thing. We need more touch. Yeah, but can't we do it on video?
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's so much of a need
Right.
for this face-to-face presence, and yet so many people now are getting so used to, hey, can't we just do a Zoom call? Can't we? Do I have to find somebody in my area?
Right. Our program is virtual for a big portion of it, and then we have a summit in person.
For teaching the facilitators, you mean?
Yeah. So we do a lot of our training program, at least, as much as it would need to be in person in an ideal scenario. There's a whole lot we can do virtually, and then we do an in-person summit that makes it more accessible for more people. But yeah, as we build out more resources, we do plan on having a touch studio where folks can come and be in person and train for in person extended period of time. But right now, we just don't have the infrastructure to host 20 folks for 6 months.
So aside from getting out into nature and slowing down, which are excellent ideas for just about everybody on the planet, unless they have some severe allergies, what are some of the things you do or you found work with people? Let's say you tap into somebody who all of a sudden realizes, you know what, I really don't have any conscious, focused, you're calling it Platonic touch in my life.
Yes.
And boy, I'd like some of that. And then they get into a group or something like yours, and then they find out that they're not comfortable with it. It's so new.
Right.
What do you do?
100%.
How do you help these people?
Yeah, I think it's a common question. Brothers come and go, I want to come to your group, but man, don't make me touch anybody. And I remind them, I say, you know what? You don't have to touch anybody ever in this work. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. This is always within your capacity. And what you'll notice in our work is, if I feel a little confusing for some people, because it feels almost as scary as touch, is we sing. And this is not like singing lessons. We sing as a village, meaning all voices are welcome. There's simple songs, but we sing. In some cases, we beatbox together. If someone loves beatboxing, we share words. We share this energy of you belong and you're connected. You don't have to do a thing beyond trying your best to fill the space with the simple energy of, I see you. Who are you? And what we learned is that the majority of our touch that really sets us up is not our skin touching skin. It's our heart fields. It's our proximity field. It's our trust field. The touch with skin is just one of probably 10 touch points that take place. And so if someone comes into a group, they find that we're singing, we're beatboxing, we're sharing poems, we're sharing stories, we're practicing just listening, not touching. We have a phrase we say now as a mantra that listening is the first hug. And what we find is that anyone that's undertouched is also underheard. They're also underseen. And so we spend the majority of our time listening to each other and practicing how to get more skillful at listening across racial differences, class differences, age differences, gender preference differences. We're like, what does it take to really hear someone that has a much different life experience than I have, and to really be curious and put my judgment or confusion, kind of lower those things that stay between us and go, I want to get better at listening and wow, what it means to be heard. And we do this kind of peer back and forth, equal sharing, because oftentimes we use a timer. We usually have a timer. We often early on use timers because oftentimes, particularly men that are overheard, that are underheard, they can just talk and not even notice they've taken up more time than the other person has gotten the word in squarewise or squarewise, sideways. Can get a word in the conversation. So we just have a little timer. It's just like 5 minutes. Share for 5 minutes. That person will share. Beep, beep, beep. Beeper goes off. All right, we're going to stop. We're going to switch. And you're going to practice listening. I mean, literally, that's the baseline of someone on an on-ramp to receiving profound touch is, can they listen? If they struggle with the listening part, we don't want to cut to the touch part at all, because it makes touch pretty dangerous and risky if they can't listen, if they haven't worked that muscle and really got attuned to what it is. You can spend a couple of years even just listening. And that's the piece that we really emphasize in our work we found early on was profound. And so we have little micro, short co-listening sessions you'll see in our film, Dark and Tin. You'll see these kind of little scenes where we're in chairs, kind of facing each other, holding hands or not. And you'll see that what we're doing is not cuddling, we're listening. And that is one of the things that I find to be, it moves the dial faster than almost anything else.
Excellent. And, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, yeah, and the person needs to be able to listen inside themselves for what comes up as they do start getting that touch. That chronically undertouched person isn't used to that level of stimulation, and their bodies may be sending them all kinds of messages about important fears or traumas from the past that if they're not listening to it, they can misread it, misinterpret it.
100%. You've nailed it. The listening is not just to the person externally, but it's the inner listening. In some ways, inner listening is more important than external. We need both. But if we can't track what's happening in our own bodies, if we're numb there, that is a place we want to make sure we give space for growth and healing to happen.
And I would imagine that, for most of the people who are drawn to the kind of work that you're going to be doing here or becoming a facilitator for that kind of work are people who've had more than average exposure to violence.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. But yeah, I think the violence exposure to their body has been oftentimes higher. That's definitely true.
But what kinds of things are you seeing and people reporting as benefits after they've been doing this work for a while?
It kind of runs a spectrum. I think what we've seen kind of consistently show up is on every level, relationships improve, marriages, friendships, children. One of the painful parts of being chronic undertouched is it really hurts our intimacies across the board. So any place we're becoming intimate.
Let me slow you down. It might just be my age. Slow the speech down a little bit here. One of the problems with chronically undertouched is
intimacy.
Intimacy, right?
Yeah. Intimacy in all relationships. And it's one of the things that we find reports back from partners going, oh my goodness, my husband has never listened to me this well, has never held me so gently, has never asked what my body needed so skillfully. I've heard family members say my dad has never sat down and had such an attuned energy to hear about my day the way he has now that he's gone through your program. We've seen folks that run small businesses go, my management team we're so much more less verbal abusive. We're de-escalating conflict easier. We're getting ahead of conflict. We're speaking about things before they build up in our bodies. We're seeing folks that have, lost loved ones, like me losing my father, really talk about them being able to really tune in to where their grief is, to curate and support grief ceremony for themselves. We've seen places where people, because our work has a lot of music involved, people realize they find their voice back. So many parts, particularly in America, so many of us have been told that we have horrible singing voices and we should stop singing. So there's so many people, Aaron, I'm singing. I'm not a singer. I don't know anything about notes or pianos or actual, I just sing. Since I came to your workshop, I'm singing now. I got my voice back. I love hearing it. I sing with friends. We're just having such a fun in our vocal space, which also is intimacy. We keep saying that note coming in, and relationship building. And I'm more connected. I'm asking better questions. So there's a way that we just see it. We see almost like an enhancement of all things relationship, all things intimate, from family to work to community. If you're engaging with a skillful listening heart and a really touched, a well-held body, we've only seen people be better humans, which makes sense, right? Because humans need this as like a part of our instincts. So just we see an enhancement, but if you had to narrow it down to some specific things, it would say the intimate space becomes safe, available, and common. And that has huge implications on just the quality and the safety of family, of relationships, of intimacy with
quality of life.
The grief. Quality of life is upscaled, in my opinion. And that's what I observe.
Yeah. That's certainly been my experience as somebody who was fortunate enough to be raised in a home with plenty of that loving touch. It's just, it's impossible for me to imagine, feeling safe without it.
Right.
So
that's beautiful. I'm so glad you grew up with that. That's such a gift.
So when you're talking about this, the last question was popping up for me was, so how long do you engage with people? Do these groups have, is it an 8-week or 10-week group, or is it an open-ended group? How do you run the groups when you're running them?
Yeah, so our support groups are technically indefinite. They would go continuously. The local ones, like if I'm leading one, it'd be indefinite. What we do is we kind of run it like a school would. You have not a quarter or a semester, but you would pick 16 weeks or 20 weeks, and you would work on a thing, a portion, and we take a break, take a month off, 2 months off, and come back and see if you would like to come back and join. So we have these breaks in between. So it's not like continuous, but they have these chapters where we take breaks and gaps in between to give us some time to integrate, practice what we learned, see if we still need this format of healing, or we'll move to more one-on-one or something else.
When you're talking about that and taking a break, would the group still meeting, but individuals take a break when they feel like it, or the group pauses?
Kind of the opposite. So say we're in a group, say maybe me, you, and 4 other brothers are in a room and working on a thing, and we go, we're going to work for 16 weeks. At the end of 16 weeks, all this group will stop meeting for 2 months. We'll take a 2-month break. In our break, I might call you up and say, what, I need to do a little session. Can I have a session? So we might have some or personally organize one-on-one time, but the group will take a formal break so that, we can be in a place to heal and recuperate, reorganize, see what our needs are. Our facilitation training program, that program is a 5-month program, and they finish, and they always can stay in contact with us. That's a kind of a continuous program that if you're training with as a participant in a group, 16 weeks or so, we take about a month off to 2 months off after 16 weeks.
All right. Okay. So can you speak about what is happening with you as a facilitator and trainer the more you're experiencing this work?
I think for me, there's a mixture of deep gratitude and excitement that I get to do this. Like, that feels like a dream come true. And then simultaneously, right next to that same feeling, there's this grief that I feel so often alone, especially early on. Now I have a little more of peers and folks to talk to, but there's a loneliness because in this country, we don't, like, if I want to play basketball, I can probably go to any given city and find a basketball court and pick up basketball, or find a gym, or so on and so forth. There's a place where I can go have activity. There's not a place where if I'm like, I'm in Baltimore, is there a Baltimore cuddle happening for men happening? Is there a thoughtful touch program happening over here in New York? Is there there's not a kind of anywhere I need to go in the country I can find a safe place where other men that have navigated other spaces like this with like me, I can meet, can find this. So it feels this scarcity, this loneliness-ish, not as bad as it was 3-4 years ago, but definitely that's one of the things that happens. So for me, what goes to my mind is how tender and invested I am into handing out this knowledge to as many people as a whole, but specifically men, and more specifically more African heritage men, that can get access to this knowledge and shake off the barriers that might be in the way. So there's a little bit of a excitement and I always say hunger to give this information, to hand out this information to anyone that feels they have a capacity to be safe and thoughtful and skillful around this tool, around this practice, around this human practice. It's like drinking water. It's unfortunate to train about it, but there's a way that I have felt some urgency there. I felt some relief when the film got finished and the TEDx talk got kind of launched. I felt some relief that there's a documentable way if my body, for whatever reason, was unable to teach this anymore. I felt like the seeds have been planted in our culture a bit, but my desire is to raise the flag higher and to get more people involved.
So where do people access the video?
Yeah, you can Google the video. The TEDx talk is available on YouTube. You just type in why I waited 12 months for a hug, and it'll pop up. And then there's cutproject.org. Also, is a link to the TEDx talk, I believe, on the pages to help make it easy for people to get access to it. So those are two easy places or easy ways you can get it. And some people just Google Dark and Tender and it pops up too. So those are all ways to access it on the internet, which is a gift nowadays, because back in the day you couldn't find anything online about this.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. It's like I remember how I would get lit up from the inside when I would hear people, if they had done a really good either a self-help or a therapy practice, and they decided to go and take it into prisons, right? And just give it away in the prisons. And the shame work that sometimes has come in and have gone into prisons and gotten these people in these circles, the great big circle, and then they ask you to, take a step in if you had this problem and this problem and this, and pretty soon all these people with all these common problems that haven't let anybody, right? They haven't shared that intimately what these problems were with anybody else in the yard, and they're sharing it publicly without having to speak about it. They just step forward if they had this happen. And so it's a genius way to get people to start sharing when they're not used to articulating and they're not used to comfort and, they're not used to having a safe place to share.
Yes.
So it's great. I'm glad you're doing the work. It's exciting to hear about, and I'm glad that you're going to be training other people. Do you have places where you market or reach out to people to become facilitators?
We use mostly Instagram as like where we put a lot of content. We're also doing shorts on YouTube, and we have a newsletter we send out each month. And then of course our website has its own opportunity for folks to stumble across it or listen to a podcast and click on it and find out about it.
So it's Cut Project. What's the URL?
It's cutproject.org.
Cutproject.org. Excellent. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed watching the video, and I appreciate the work you're doing and your willingness to share with us. And I look forward to hearing about, hey, they've got a cut meeting. Look, we've got AA meetings. They've got cut meetings coming up all over the place. That'd be great. That would be delightful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. It's been a delight and extraordinarily useful. Aaron Johnson is a public speaker, facilitator, filmmaker, and touch activist whose work centers on one of the most underinvested topics in America, the emotional and relational lives of Black men. As the founder of the Chronically UnderTouched Project and a founder of Holistic Resistance and Grief to Action, Aaron creates environments where Black-bodied individuals can express their full selves and be held with tenderness, care, and truth. Aaron also challenges the deeply entrenched, quote, Black brute, close quotes, archetype by amplifying alternative images rooted in softness, intimacy, and humanity. His documentary work, retreats, and workshops offer a rare cultural record of tender Black masculinity that has been missing from mainstream representation.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.